What if I told you that the one ingredient every angler swears by in winter is actually the reason you're not catching fish? Sounds crazy, right? Today, we're talking about bloodworms. Specifically, we are tackling the sacred tradition of dumping handfuls of them into your winter ground bait. I'm going to show you why this tried and true method might be the single biggest mistake you're making on the ice or the cold bank. There is a hidden reason why fish will swim right past your perfectly presented hookbait, and it has everything to do with what you're putting in your feeder. This isn't just a theory, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how fish behave when the water gets cold. So before we get into it, let me know in the comments right now, do you believe adding a lot of bloodworms to your ground bait is essential for winter success? A simple yes or no. Let's see where we all stand before we blow this whole topic wide open. For as long as most of us have been fishing, the advice has been passed down like gospel. Winter means cold water, lethargic fish, and the need for a high-value, easy-to-eat bait. And what sits at the top of that list? The humble bloodworm. The logic seems flawless. Fish are moving slow, they don't want a big meal, so give them a carpet of their favorite natural food to graze on. We've seen our fathers and grandfathers do it. We've watched professional match anglers on television carefully riddle their ground bait, ensuring it's packed with live bloodworms. It has become an automatic, almost thoughtless step in the process of setting up for a winter session. You arrive at your spot, you mix your dark, fine particle ground bait, you open that little plastic bag of wriggling red gold, and you mix it all in. It's muscle memory. But what if that muscle memory is based on a flawed premise? What if we've been focusing on the wrong thing all along? First, we need to understand the cold-blooded truth about a fish in winter. It's not just a slightly slower version of a summer fish. Its entire biology has shifted. As a cold-blooded creature, its body temperature matches the near-freezing water around it. This dramatically slows down its metabolism. Think of it like a machine running in low-power mode. It doesn't need much fuel to operate. Its digestive system works incredibly slowly, meaning a small meal can take a very long time to process. The primary instinct is not to gorge itself, but to conserve as much energy as possible. Every single movement is calculated. Chasing food is an expense of calories, and in the winter, fish are living on a very tight energy budget. They are not actively hunting for a massive feast. Instead, they are opportunistic, looking for the easiest possible meal that provides more energy than it costs to consume. This fundamental biological fact is the key to everything. We, as warm-blooded mammals who need to eat constantly to stay warm, often project our own needs onto the fish. We think as a big, generous offering of food is an act of kindness, but for a fish in 3-degree water, it can be overwhelming and unnatural. So how does a fish running on this low-power mode actually find its food? In the summer, sight can play a big role, but in the winter, especially in colored or deep water, scent and vibration are king. A fish's sense of smell, or more accurately taste, is incredibly sensitive. They can detect minute particles of amino acids in the water from a great distance. This is their primary tool for locating a potential food source without expending unnecessary energy swimming around, searching. They will follow this scent trail slowly and deliberately, expecting to find the source. The crucial point here is what happens when they arrive. They are not in a rush. They are not competing aggressively. They will investigate the source of the smell with caution. They are looking for that one easy-to-grab morsel. They are not prepared to sift through a massive volume of food. This is a delicate dance of energy conservation. If the food source seems too complex or requires too much effort to sort through, they may simply ignore it or pick at it half-heartedly. Understanding this changes the game from feeding the fish to luring the fish. You don't want to give them dinner on the bottom. You want to send them an invitation. Now let's look at the traditional logic that we've all followed for years. The thinking goes like this: fish love bloodworms. It's winter and they are picky. Therefore, if we give them a lot of what they love, they will stay in our fishing spot or swim for a longer period. This will increase our chances of one of them eventually finding our hook bait. On the surface, this makes perfect sense. It's the chumming principle that works so well in other types of fishing, like for sharks or in saltwater. You create a field of food to attract and hold the target species. The problem is, this logic fails to account for the drastically reduced appetite and slow metabolism of freshwater fish in winter. A bream or a roach in icy water is not a shark in the warm Gulf Stream. It doesn't need to be held in place with a constant supply of food. In fact, providing that constant supply of food is often the very thing that stops you from getting a bite. We are applying a summertime aggressive feeding strategy to a wintertime survival mode situation. It's like trying to force feed someone who has just finished a massive holiday dinner. They simply don't have the appetite, and you're more likely to put them off entirely than to entice them. This brings us to the first major problem, a concept I call instant saturation. Picture the moment your feeder or your first ball of groundbait hits the bottom. It settles, and a cloud of particles and, in this case, hundreds of live bloodworms spreads out in a small area. A nearby roach, attracted by the sound and the initial scent, moves in to investigate. Remember, its stomach is tiny and its appetite is minimal. It sees this sudden buffet on the lake bed. It doesn't need to search. It simply has to inhale the water and silt, and it will get a mouthful of free-floating bloodworms. How many does it take to satisfy its needs for the next few hours? 5, 10, maybe even less. In a matter of minutes, that fish has consumed all the food it needs. It is fully satiated. It has no biological reason to continue feeding. So what does it do? It either sits there inactive and full, right on top of your hook bait, or it slowly drifts away. Its job for the day done. You've successfully attracted the fish and you've successfully fed it. The one thing you haven't done is catch it. You've become a charity, not an angler. This happens far more often than people realize. Let's use a human analogy to make this crystal clear. Imagine you are sitting on your sofa and you're just slightly hungry, not starving, just a little peckish. You're thinking about getting up to get a single cookie from the kitchen. It's a clear, defined goal. Now imagine that at that exact moment someone comes in and throws 1,000 cookie sprinkles all over you and the sofa. They are everywhere, on your lap, on the floor, down the cushions. Now your slight hunger can easily be satisfied by just licking a few sprinkles off your shirt. You can get the taste and the small amount of sugar you craved without any effort at all. Are you still going to make that trip to the kitchen to get that one whole cookie? Absolutely not. You've been instantly satisfied by the low-effort food that was dumped on you. The ground bait full of bloodworms is the cloud of sprinkles. Your hook bait is the single cookie in the kitchen. You have given the fish a reason not to seek out your specific offering. You've solved their hunger problem for them, and in doing so, you've removed any incentive they had to find your hook. This is the essence of the instant saturation problem. The tragic irony here is that the bloodworm's greatest strength is also its greatest curse in this situation. It is the perfect food item for a winter fish. It's small, soft, easy to digest, and packed with protein. There's no hard shell to crunch, no wiggling that requires a lot of energy to subdue. It is essentially a perfectly designed fish calorie delivery system. A lethargic bream can simply flare its gills over a patch of your ground bait and inhale several bloodworms with almost zero energy expenditure. This is wonderful for the fish, but terrible for you, because it's so perfect and so easy to eat. It doesn't take many to fill them up. We think of a meal in our own terms, but for a 200-gram roach in winter, a meal might be a dozen bloodworms. If your first cast with the feeder delivers 200 bloodworms to the bottom, you have just delivered enough food to feed an entire school of roach. You've created a fish soup kitchen. They arrive, they get their free handout, and they leave. The very effectiveness of the bait is what makes it so dangerous when used in large quantities as loose feed. Now let's move on to the second and perhaps even bigger issue. This is the needle in a haystack problem. This isn't about biology, it's about simple mathematics and probability. Let's assume for a moment that you've managed to attract a fish that hasn't been instantly satiated. It's still in a feeding mood, and it's looking for your hook bait. By packing your ground bait with hundreds of free offerings that are identical to what's on your hook, you have created a statistical nightmare for yourself. You are asking a fish to pick out one specific item from a field of hundreds of identical items. Angling is all about tilting the odds in your favor. You want to make your hook bait the most obvious, most attractive, and most desirable thing in the immediate vicinity. When you surround it with a cloud of clones, you are doing the exact opposite. You are actively camouflaging your hook bait. You are making it less likely to be found. It's a game of chance, and you have stacked the deck against yourself. A fish moving through the swim, picking up bloodworms at random, has only a tiny, fractional chance of picking up the one that happens to have a hook in it. Let's put some hard numbers on this just to illustrate the point. A standard portion of bloodworms, a small wrap of them in newspaper, can contain over 1,000 individual worms. A conservative angler might add, say, 250 of these to their initial ground bait mix. And let's say you put a small feeder in, which deposits maybe 50 of those bloodworms onto the bottom in a 1 square foot area. On your hook, you have 2 bloodworms. So, in that small zone, you now have 52 items for the fish to eat. 2 of them can catch the fish and 50 of them cannot. That means your hook bait represents less than 4% of the available food. The fish has a 96% chance of eating something that won't result in a bite. And that's just from the first cast. Every time you recast with more feed, you are adding more hay to the haystack and making your needle even harder to find. You could have fish in your swim all day long happily feeding, and you would never know it because the odds of them finding your specific hook bait are astronomically low. You're not fishing, you're running a lottery. Let's visualize the scene from the fish's point of view. A cautious old bream slowly fans its way into your swim, drawn by the scent. It lowers its head to the bottom. What does it see? It doesn't see a single tempting morsel calling out to it. Instead, it sees a carpet, a smorgasbord of tiny red items scattered amongst the ground bait particles. Its feeding instinct kicks in, but not in an aggressive way. It begins to graze like a cow in a field. It gently sifts through the substrate, picking up a bloodworm here, a particle of ground bait there. It is calm, unhurried. There is no competition. Your hook bait with your 2 bloodworms is just another part of this landscape. It might be slightly to the left or slightly to the right of where the fish is currently grazing. The fish might pick up 10, 20, 30 free bloodworms before it even comes close to your hook, and by that point, its minimal appetite might already be satisfied. It's no longer looking for food. You presented it with a puzzle with hundreds of pieces when all you needed to do was offer it one. But, wait, I can hear people saying, the whole point is to hold the fish in the swim. This is one of the most common justifications for this method. And on the surface, it's true. A bed of bloodworms will absolutely hold fish in your swim, but it holds them in a non-productive state. You are creating a fish daycare center, not a hunting ground. The fish are there, they are occupied. and they are feeding, but they are feeding on everything except your hook bait. It's a false positive. You might see liners on your tip, little plucks and rattles as fish bump into your line while they are feeding on the loose offerings. Now, this can give you the impression that you're close to a bite, that the fish are active, but it's a cruel deception. Those are the signs of fish that are already eating the free meal you provided. They have no reason to single out your hook bait. The goal of winter fishing shouldn't be just to hold fish. The goal should be to attract fish and then compel them to eat a very specific item, your hook bait. By giving them the buffet, you remove the compulsion. Let's walk through a very typical scenario that probably sounds familiar to many of you. You get to the lake or river. It's a cold, crisp morning. The water is clear and still. You're filled with optimism. You mix up your favorite dark winter ground bait. You lovingly add a generous portion of expensive bloodworms, thinking you're giving the fish the absolute best you can offer. You carefully plumb the depth and find a nice spot on a shelf or in a deeper hole. You make 5 or 6 casts with a loaded feeder to lay down a rich, inviting bed of bait. You then put on your hook length with 2 perfect bloodworms, cast out to the exact same spot, and set your rod in the rests. You sit back, full of confidence, and you wait. You are doing everything exactly as you've been taught. You've laid the table perfectly for your underwater guests. You've spared no expense. The trap is set, but you've accidentally set the wrong kind of trap. You've baited it with 1,000 free prizes instead of just one. An hour passes, nothing. Not a twitch. You start to doubt yourself. Maybe the fish aren't here today. Maybe it's too cold. Maybe the pressure is wrong. You decide to top up the swim, so you cast out the feeder a few more times, adding even more bloodworms to the pile. Another hour goes by, silence. By midday, you're frustrated. You've seen other anglers leaving, complaining about a tough day. You pack up, convinced it was just one of those days where the fish have lockjaw. But here's the devastating reality of what might have actually happened. A small shoal of roach arrived in your swim 20 minutes after your initial bombardment. They found the bed of food. Over the next half hour, they leisurely grazed on the hundreds of free bloodworms. They filled their bellies, became completely satiated, and then slowly moved on right past your hook bait. They were there. They did feed. But they were gone before you even had a chance to doubt your methods. Your generosity was your downfall. The very thing you thought would guarantee success was the very thing that ensured failure. Now let's be balanced here. Am I saying that adding bloodworms to ground bait never works? No, of course not. There are specific situations where it can be effective, and it's important to understand them. The primary exception is when you are faced with a large number of fish in a confined space, and they are competing aggressively for food. Think of a heavily stocked commercial fishery in a match fishing situation. When dozens of fish are packed into a small area and are all trying to eat before their neighbor does, a bed of bait can trigger a competitive feeding frenzy. In this scenario, the fish don't have time to be picky. They grab whatever they can as fast as they can. In this chaos, they are much more likely to grab your hook bait by mistake. But let's be honest, how often do we encounter these exact conditions on a typical winter pleasure session on a natural lake, canal, or river? It's the exception, not the rule. For the average angler facing lethargic, cautious wild fish, the feed frenzy method is simply not the right tool for the job. The competition factor is the key that unlocks the exception. If you have, for example, a large shoal of winter bream that have just moved into an area and are looking to feed up before a weather change, then things are different. In this high-density situation, the fish's natural greed and fear of missing out can override their winter lethargy. When one fish starts feeding, the others rush in to get their share. This is when a carpet of bait, including bloodworms, can switch them on and get them grubbing around on the bottom with abandon. The same can be true for F1 carp on commercial waters, which are bred to be competitive feeders. However, the vast majority of winter fishing scenarios involve small, scattered groups of fish, or even lone individuals that are not in a competitive mindset. They are survivors, not competitors. Applying a competition-based baiting strategy to non-competing fish is a recipe for a blank day. You must tailor your approach to the mood of the fish, and in winter that mood is almost always cautious and reserved. So, what is the smarter approach? If we abandon the idea of a free buffet, what do we replace it with? The new goal is simple: attraction without saturation. You want to use the incredible drawing power of the bloodworm to pull fish into your swim, but without giving them enough food to satisfy their hunger. You want to create a powerful scent trail that promises a meal but delivers very little in terms of actual substance. The idea is to create desire, to stimulate their appetite, to make them actively search for the source of that wonderful smell. When they arrive in your swim, they should be hungry and hunting, not full and lazy. This is a complete reversal of the traditional mindset. We are moving from being a feeder of fish to being a teaser of fish. We are using their most powerful winter sense, their sense of smell, to lead them directly to our trap, which is the hookbait. This method requires more thought and finesse, but the results can be absolutely revolutionary. This brings us to the game-changing strategy, the bloodworm juice method. It sounds simple, and it is, but it is profoundly effective. The core principle is that in winter, the scent of the bloodworm is far more valuable than the body of the bloodworm itself. That potent, amino acid-rich liquid that bloodworms are packed in is one of the most powerful fish attractants known to man. It dissolves in the cold water, creating a scent cloud that can travel a significant distance, pulling fish in like a magnet. By focusing on harnessing this scent, you get all of the benefits of the bloodworm's drawing power with none of the drawbacks of overfeeding. You are sending out a powerful signal that says, food is here. But when the fish arrive, the only significant food item available is the one you have strategically placed on your hook. You have created the perfect ambush. The fish arrives primed to eat, and your hookbait is the only logical target for it to attack. It is the most prominent and satisfying item in the entire swim. So how do you actually do this on the bank? It's incredibly simple. First, you need a lean groundbait mix. By lean, I mean a dark, fine particle mix with very little food content of its own. No sweet corn, no pellets, no seeds. Its only job is to be a carrier for the scent. Now, for the magic ingredient, you can do this in two ways. The first is to take a very small amount of your bloodworms, maybe what you would use on your hook for the whole session, and place them in a small bait pot. Then, using a pair of scissors or a small pestle, you mash them into a pulp. This releases all of their incredible juices. You then mix this pulp into the water you will use to mix your ground bait. The second, even simpler method is to use the liquid that the bloodworms were stored in. Don't throw that smelly water away. It's pure gold. Add that directly to your ground bait mix. You are now creating a ground bait that absolutely screams bloodworm to every fish in the area, but contains virtually no whole food items. Let's consider the effect of this juice strategy from the fish's perspective once more. It detects the powerful scent trail and follows it to your swim. Its appetite is stimulated and it expects to find a big meal. When it arrives, its senses are overloaded with the smell of bloodworms, but its eyes see very little. There are no wriggling worms carpeting the bottom. There's just the fine particle ground bait, which offers little nutritional value. The fish becomes frustrated and begins to hunt actively for the source of the overwhelming smell. It is now in search mode, its caution momentarily overridden by the promise of a meal. And what does it find during this search? it finds your hookbait. 1, 2, or maybe 3 perfect wriggling bloodworms presented immaculately. In a swim that is otherwise barren of food but rich in scent, your hookbait becomes an unmissable beacon. It is the only logical conclusion to the fish's search. The bite is often not a shy nibble, but a confident, positive take from a fish that believes it has finally found the prize. The only way to truly believe this is to prove it to yourself. So I'm laying down a challenge, the ultimate on-the-bank test. The next time you go winter fishing, if conditions allow, set up 2 rods. On your first rod, use the traditional method we have just deconstructed. Mix a rich ground bait, add a good handful of whole bloodworms and fish with a feeder, topping up the swim regularly. On your second rod, fished an equal distance away, try the bloodworm juice method. Use a lean, dark ground bait mixed only with the scent from a few crushed bloodworms or their storage liquid. In your feeder for this rod, use only this lean ground bait. On both rods, use the exact same hook bait, perhaps 2 bloodworms on a fine wire hook. Fish this experiment for 3 or 4 hours and be honest with the results. Keep account of the bites on each rod. I am willing to bet that the rod fished over the scent-based lean ground bait will outfish the one over the traditional food-rich ground bait by a significant margin. The proof is not in my words, but in the pull of the line. So let's wrap this up. We've challenged a piece of advice that many of us took as absolute fact. The big takeaway is this: adding large quantities of whole bloodworms to your winter ground bait can be one of the most counterproductive things you can do. It works against the fish's slow metabolism by satiating them instantly, and it works against you by creating a needle in a haystack problem, making your hookbait almost impossible to find. The truly unexpected turn here is that the most powerful part of the bloodworm for winter attraction isn't its body, but its juice, its scent. By shifting your mindset from feeding the fish to luring them with scent, you can completely transform your results. This isn't about saving money on bait, it's about being a smarter, more effective angler by understanding the creature you're trying to catch. It's a small change in your mix that can make the difference between a frustrating blank and a memorable day on a cold bank. Thank you so much for watching and for being open to a new idea. If this video challenged one of your long-held beliefs or gave you something to think about, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed for more tips that go against the grain. Now, I have to ask you, after hearing all this, are you going to change how you use bloodworms this winter? Or do you still believe the old ways are the best and that this is all just talk? Let's get a real honest debate going in the comments below. I want to hear it all